Welcome, everyone, to this Global Positive Health Institute podcast. My name is Liana Lianov, the president of the Global Positive Health Institute. And what we cover on this podcast are all things related to positive psychology and health and well-being and how they interrelate, and especially how they're relevant in current healthcare systems and to lifestyle medicine, as many of our viewers are health professionals. And today, we're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Prachi Garodia. She is also on our GPHI Advisory Council. She is board certified in internal medicine, lifestyle medicine, and integrative medicine. And she is also a board certified national health and wellness coach and the whole health clinical director for the Miami VA. So welcome, Prachi. Glad to have you aboard.
Thank you so much, Liana, for inviting me for this amazing opportunity to discuss about positive psychology and happiness, and which really is close to my heart. So thank you. And thank you to the listeners for listening to us.
Terrific. What really got your attention in this whole area of healthy lifestyles, and particularly the positive psychology aspects? What first sort of made you say, boy, this is really important, I'm really interested in this?
Sure, that's a long story, but I grew up in India, and I grew up with practices of yoga and Ayurveda, which really are utilizing that science of longevity and happiness and well-being. So growing up, I learned some of these practices, but when you come to the US or any fast-paced world, and then you get engrossed in sort of, pursuing the career and everything else, which happens to busy physicians for sure, and other work groups too, everything starts falling off, like your self-care practices. Like, for example, my yoga practice took a hit. I got off it for like 8 to 10 years and started noticing pretty significant burnout built up, especially in the last 10 years or so before I shifted. Then I was looking for happiness. Where's my original happy, cheerful self gone? And here I'm feeling like tired and depressed and sort of really lost my inner drive. That inspired me to look more into the science, and the emerging science of positive psychology and the science of happiness really caught my attention at that time. So then I started studying more into it, practicing a few things, bringing my self-care back. And then, I've noticed my mood's lifting up, my resilience improving, and my burn-off started to not feel so burned out, So that's what sort of got me back into learning the science. And I learned that the happiness is not in just pursuing outside objects. It really is inside. You just have to uncover it and work on sustaining that.
So what I'm hearing is that you found over time, as you got busy and life really took over, you lost some of these kinds of practices that fit under this realm of a healthy lifestyle of positive psychology. I hear you saying you kind of lost your spark, and you were looking for that internal spark again, that little vitality and energy that makes us feel that life is worth living, and that you found it again by really diving back into these kinds of practices. So I'd love to hear what some of these practices are. What are your favorites? How are you applying them now?
Sure. I mean, I've drawn on a lot of the ancient science practices, including meditation and yoga, which is, I do sort of a more intense yoga, which is more of the circulatory, and pranayama, which moves the energy really well. So that's really helpful for me. One thing which really turned my whole emotional and mental well-being around was practicing gratitude and compassion. So when I was in the deepest of my burnout and low moods and everything, that's something which really brought me out. And I'm like a total sold out on that practice of both gratitude and compassion. Besides that, I really love getting into the flow of things, like, for example, things which I enjoy doing, like gardening, for example. I just lose myself, lose sense of time. I can come back from hard work and spend 2 to 3 hours in my garden and feel as energetic as if I was like at the beginning of the day. So it's really nurturing and revitalizing, just being exposed to nature. And then hiking, dancing, cooking really good meals, plant-based whole food meals for my loved ones and my family, and just listening to music. So these are the things which I utilize um, commonly in my daily practice.
I hear these common themes with many of the interviews that we have on this podcast: time in nature, connecting with others, and then, yeah, some of our personal passions, which for some people, for example, it is music, etc. Others, it's gardening. And we all have to find that sweet spot where we're paying attention that this really feeds our soul, these kinds of activities. So that's wonderful. And so as a health practitioner, how are you incorporating this in your work with your patients?
So what I start with is I start with finding out what the person really wants and how satisfied they are with their personal health and well-being, with their emotional and mental health, and overall in life. And that actually is provided by the VA whole health model really well, in which they ask the mission, aspiration, and purpose questions. So connecting the person to their meaning and purpose, and then also looking at the scale of where they are in the life, and then looks at self-care circles of health, which is, exercising, moving the body, good nutrition, food and drinks, healthy surroundings, healthy relationships, personal development. So we look at all of those self-care, sleep, relaxing, it's about power of the body and mind both is connected, and the social community is really paid attention to. So we look at it in a very systematic way, and it's a great framework which is provided to all the veterans and all to the community for free to access. So I really utilize all of those tools regularly. And then to build on that, then we provide them, certain practices and exercise. We teach them deep abdominal breathing, meditation practices. We encourage them to connect with their peers and community, find really good social support, and develop those relationships, because they should be meaningful and supportive to really contribute to your positivity. Just because you have like 100, 1,000 Facebook friends, if you don't have that connection and the positive relationship, it really would not contribute as much.
Yeah, that's a lovely description of the whole health program, which is one of the front runners in terms of a large health system that is really incorporating in a major way what we consider elements of a healthy lifestyle, positive psychology, and elements of this, which in the whole health program is part of integrative medicine, but also, of course, the crux of that is part of lifestyle medicine, which is so many of our viewers are part of the lifestyle medicine community. And I would love to see other large health systems take that on as well. But so many of our health colleagues are not so fortunate to be part of a lovely program like the whole health program. So what advice do you have for them in terms of incorporating some of these elements in no matter what healthcare setting that they're working in?
Sure. I mean, one piece of first advice, which I will provide to them, is to remember that the happiness pie, the factors which contribute to happiness and positivity, 50% of happiness is due to genes, 10% is due to life circumstances, and 40% is actually things which you can do and develop. So even though you're born with like not such a happy gene, you can develop, 40% of that in your life by making different personal choices, which will lead you towards that. So I would encourage them to remember that and convey that message to their patients when they encounter them. Also, I would highly encourage them to practice some of these positive psychology interventions themselves. For example, a very simple practice is three good things, TGT. So what that involves is just writing in a journal three good things which happened to you during the day. And it could be a person, a thing which happened, a pet, whatever that happened, which really spoke to you and touched you. And that also shifts their attitude and vision. They actually start looking for more positive. So it takes away that negative bias, which as humans, we are we're sort of built in to look at that negative and remember that. That shifts it away and starts making us look at the positive. So I encourage that. There has been research. If you do it every night for a week, the impact in life satisfaction and happiness grows exponentially from few weeks to 3 months up to 6 months. And that was the length of the study. I'm sure it continues if you do it intermittently in between. And that's what I noticed in my personal life when I turned my burnout around using those techniques.
Yes, it's really about shifting our attention to what's going well, and to the extent possible, acknowledging, but then really letting go of things that aren't going so well, especially things that perhaps we don't have direct control over. And then we end up spinning and ruminating and getting in a dark place. So if we can do the opposite and spin and ruminate on positive things, in fact, that's one of our exercises that we've used with GPHI in our workshops, is that positive reminiscence, really relive some positive emotions, or if you're having that good experience, to savor those positive emotions. That goes a long way. And that's just a lovely and easy way, like you say, for individuals, any of us, to get into that frame of mind. And as we're looking to really connect our healthy habits with our positive emotions, because we know that positive emotions drive healthy habits, and we know in lifestyle medicine that healthy habits are the root of what can not only prevent but treat and reverse all kinds of chronic illnesses. And if people are paying attention that, yeah, I want to harness those positive emotions and make them useful for my physical health, not only my emotional and mental well-being, so they really are linked not only to happiness but to actual physical health. How do we do that? How do we connect those two?
Yeah, that is a challenge, right? Right. Yeah, so yeah, definitely bringing awareness to everybody, and maybe have reading enough books or accessing different resources, both for the practitioners and for the patients, the consumers, the layman people, like normal population, is a great idea. And that brings to mind, like, for example, the yoga practices and the Ayurveda practices, they always talk about certain do's and don'ts, like the social norms and everything you have to follow. And that's why it's a very pro-social, optimistic foundation built because of following those, and a lot of social connectivity in there. It also talks about like acceptance of one's past, and not reminiscing about the negativity in the future, but looking forward with optimism and giving it your best shot without being so attached to the results. So continue doing your work without being attached, which is challenging because we all want the prize and the fruit. So we put the seed in, we water it, we want the fruit, and the seed. So just accepting if the fruit or the tree doesn't turn out the way we want it to, and letting go of that sense of like trying to control it. So being content and satisfied, that all draws everything in. And the way to tie it in the workplace is like, you basically spend time connecting with your team and, just accepting everybody and sort of letting go if the end result is not what you desired. I'm just thinking of the workplace wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. It applies at home and at work in our environment. Is again letting go of the negative, really emphasizing for ourselves in our where we draw our attention to what's going well, maybe pointing that out that a coworker is helping us and that lifts their day. So there's those acts of kindness, of course. And then with the connection on the physical habits is to whenever, and whether it's like you say, healthy cooking, being physically active, doing these other activities, when we feel a little boost of emotion, to be aware of it and to link that in our hearts and minds, that as we're doing this healthy habit, that it feels good, and let's just savor that and remember that, so that then we will more naturally go back to those healthy habits. Yeah.
Totally. And picking up like a walking buddy is a great idea. Like I remember during lunchtime when we were pre-COVID, when I used to go with a walk with a colleague, we used to come back all energized and feeling really good. The BDNF was releasing, the dopamine was high, like we had vented, even if we talked about like venting, that was good. It's still the circulation and the connection and the fresh air really brought that positivity back into our life, which carried the whole day after that. So we came back really energized from that. So connecting, and as you said, like being kind and just passing that random act of kindness, and people who are witnessing, they also get a rise in dopamine and all the good feel good hormones. So you're doing the good and you're also creating a lot more goodness in the world.
Yeah, terrific. So as we close out our brief session, I'd love for you to share what are some of your favorite resources. You already mentioned that the VA Whole Health system and those materials are free for those who are interested in using those. So that's a wonderful resource. What are some of your other favorite resources?
Well, one of the very good resource which I recommend for professionals is the Authentic Happiness at UPenn. Dr. Martin Seligman's, who's the founder of positive psychology in the 1980s. That's a great site. They also provide surveys measuring happiness and life satisfaction. And there's, Edward Diner. I mean, there's so many resources as instruments to measure the baseline and to see where you can go after practicing certain instruments and tools, practices, interventions. And then there's Greater Good Science Center, which is more layman and common. So, just general information there, a lot of activities. They have a happiness calendar for the whole month, which I download and share at my work. So one thing to do every day for the whole month. Obviously, the wire corrector to find out your own personal strengths and learning how to utilize those. Those are great tools, both for the practitioner and the patients or the general population. And then there's like International Positive Education Network, Center of Applied Positive Psychology. We definitely have GPHI, so which yes. We are both part of. And then you're doing such great work in there. And
Thank you. Yes.
Most welcome. So those are some, and there's several other books to read. Like, there's Authentic Happiness, Flourish, Hope Circuit, Grit, Resilience Factor, so many books to read for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. Those are all great examples. And then as we were just chatting before this podcast, a brand new book that I was sharing with you that I'd also love to share with the audience is from the Royal College of Surgeons, Ireland. It's called Positive Health, 100 plus research-based positive psychology and lifestyle medicine tools to enhance your well-being, and it has several authors. The lead author is Yolanta Burke, and I do recommend that as a new, brand new, hot off the press resource that I'm sure we'll all be anxious to dive into. So that's terrific. Well, as we close, Prachi, what is the single take-home message you would like our listeners to have in mind as they finish listening to this podcast? What should they really hang on to and use in their daily lives or in their professional lives?
So one thing which I would recommend for all of us to keep in mind is start treating yourself like as if you treat your most loved family member or a friend or pet instead of your own enemy, or your worst critic. So slowly start accepting yourself as a human and seeing the commonality in being human, that experience, which brings a lot of things to us, ups and downs. And then also choosing to keep company with things which create happiness in your mind. And just some practices, whatever brings you happiness and satisfaction. And we're not talking about substances and everything. I mean, you don't want to be high, but you can be naturally high just by doing those things. And remembering that the key to lifelong happiness is taking those time to cultivate those small changes on a regular basis. Gratitude journal, practicing kindness, nurturing optimism, learning to forgive, all of those, finding flow, fun things to do, all of those.
Wonderful happiness habits, small habits that don't necessarily take a lot of time and can make such a big difference in our lives. So absolutely. Thank you so much, Prachi, for joining us for this GPHI podcast. And thank you to our listeners. We hope to see you again on one of these podcasts. And in the meantime, be happy, healthy, and safe. And until next time, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.